right from the beginning of class? That's us. That's where we, by the way, that's an American point of view. You could go to plenty of other places. I think I mentioned the guy from Pakistan that criticized my one YouTube video because I'm clearly wrong. Because he's not thinking the way an American would think, you know. So it's always context dependent. And also, utilitarianism tends to be social. I think this might be true. It's one that maximizes utility for the most people. Although remember, there are special people. You've got to treat the special people better. But pragmatism, it's more focused on the individual's experience and growth. And in fact, if I were to do a rehash of my cognitive map, right? I would, put the I over here, certainty up here, uncertainty down here. And the we over here, I put Hume over here, as he's focused on the community. We learn the values of the community, and as a result, our passions that we grow up with override reason. We use arguments in order to argue for the things we're passionate about. The self, on the other hand, Aristotle, is like, eudaimonia. I'm focused on my excellence, right? Kant I put up here. You put the Bible up there. Deontological, the deontological. Which is duty. Your duty. You know what your duty is, and that's what you have to do. So it could be biblical, Islamic, follow the Quran, whatever. I don't think it's that easy to follow the Quran, actually. But in any case, when we talk about, birth, you come in here. Typically, if you're in a good home, you kind of head this way. You head towards this side, which would be, where I would put the Pope. He's certain about what he knows, and he's concerned about the we. So that's where I kind of put the Pope. Remember Jerry Prevost? Anybody remember Jerry Prevost? He was the Baptist minister over at Baxter Avenue, the big Baptist church there. I used to point out that he was that way too, but I don't think anybody knows him anymore. But in any case, where we end up being pulled, I think, as a typical American, is high school especially will pull us down towards uncertainty. That's where I put John Stuart Mill and utility down there. But the idea that evolution means that our concept of the moral is always progressing, hopefully. Science is helping us with science too. I don't know if I played the Sam Harris TED Talk, where he argues that science can figure out what's morally right. That's kind of a great expose of a utilitarian point of view, but at the same time, he wouldn't be convincing to someone who didn't agree with him that the whole point of morality was the greatest happiness. Remember, there are cultures out there that believe that the moral point of view is nothing to do with happiness. Happiness has nothing to do with it. In fact, the more happy you are, the worse you probably are being, right? Sam isn't going to be able to be persuasive with folks like that. But the American point of view is supported by Alistair McIntyre. Show you a little. Still alive, I hope. Yeah, he's 96. He's originally from Glasgow, however you say that. I know I can't say it right, but you know, that's, if you're Scottish, maybe you could say it. But he's been teaching in America for so long, as you can see, all the places he's been, that even Wikipedia refers to him as an American philosopher, which is like, well, but if he's born in Scotland, well, I don't know how that all works. But he's an Aristotelian, so eudaimonia is the best thing that an American typically could do. We have so many opportunities because all of these converge in our society. So you basically have a certain amount of confusion already there because our culture is open to this point of view, this point of view, this point of view, this point, you know, so his conclusion is, as Americans, our best point of view for theory, a theory to explain what's our meaning of life, ought to be eudaimonia. I should be focused on my self-satisfaction, my self-accomplishment, you know, my happiness. How do I focus on that? Now, of course, the thing is, in order for me to be happy, I have to be social. So I'm not totally ignoring others, right? I'm not being Elon Musk, you know, which is, maybe I shouldn't mention Elon Musk in that context, but from what I understand, thank you, Walter Isaacson's book, Elon Musk, he's probably autistic and not able to empathize with other people, whether he was born that way or if he was beaten up so many times, you know, who knows, but, you know, he's notorious for, you know, working with someone and, you know, awarding them for things and then being furious at some dumb thing they did and firing them immediately because he doesn't really think, you know, what's that doing to the other person. Even to the point where he'll give a Nazi salute, you know, at a political rally. You know, oh my goodness, you know. But so, Alasdair MacIntyre is an interesting example of someone and his argument, not just Aristotle, by the way, he's also a follower of Thomas Aquinas, so he's got a unique perspective that's Aquinas imposed on Aristotle. Well, remember, Aquinas was a follower of Aristotle, so it follows up on that, and you can see that he's primarily been associated with Catholic philosophy throughout his career. So the pragmatist is more focused on the self. That makes sense. And our problem with certainty, you know, in an evolutionary theory, the oak tree starts out as an acorn, but becomes a sprout, becomes a sapling, becomes a small tree, becomes a big tree, becomes a rotten pile of wood lying on the ground, right? You know, at what point is it not an oak tree? We would say it's an oak tree, although how do you even use family resemblance to determine, hey, that's an oak tree? Well, okay, DNA or something, you know, you recognize the wood or whatever, right? But at the same time, if we apply that same kind of concept to ethics, we realize, well, wait a minute, you know, okay, so the founding fathers, you know, said all men are created equal. They clearly didn't mean that in the sense of a contemporary perspective. But over history, that perspective did change. We added more people to who they might have meant as all men. Add some women, you know, add people with property. Oh, wait a minute. How about these people? Wait a minute, they're not people. Yes, they are. No, they're not. Yes, they are. Now, of course, we're faced with, all the, I can never remember all the letters. What is it? Queer, lesbian, L is the first letter, lesbian.
GBT.
What's the G stand for?
Gay.
Gay? Okay, I didn't know we still used that, but I guess
Gay
we
and
do.
queer, I guess, are different.
So, you got all those letters plus, and then we put a plus on the end because, well, we're so confused, we need a plus sign to indicate, and future confused situations, that we might want to add to who gets rights, etc. So we're clearly, in a sense, looking at our ethics evolving. Medical rights. Who the heck in Jefferson's, nobody wanted medicine was a scary thing. Nobody wanted that. It kills people. Now we want to go to the hospital, for things. All right. So here's a nice nutshell, which is kind of cool. I like the word nutshell. Unless you get one in your mouth. They're terrible. You need to make sure you get all the shells out. Almost as bad as eggshells. Which puzzled me when I was a kid in Catholic Mass, and they were always singing Gloria in eggshells, Sis Deo. I couldn't figure out why are eggshells so Gloria. That and my dad always using the middle initial when he
So it was my ex-Chelsea.
Ex-Chelsea?
My ex-Chelsea.
Ex-Chelsea. Oh, okay. Okay. No, my dad always used to, Jesus H. Christ. What does H stand for? All right. How many of you have heard that? Jesus H. Christ. Yeah. What a cult. So, all right. So that's fun. Guys, have any questions for ChatGPT? Do you all play with it? I've been playing with Grok.com. Have you tried that? That's Elon Musk's AI, XAI. Grok.com. I've had a ball with that so far. Okay.
Q is questioning, not queer. In LGBTQ,
Really?
Q stands for questioning.
I totally thought it was queer also. I did not know that.
And I thought, the word for spoon in French is queer. Because it's not straight, it's curved. And we do say there's spooning, etc., right? So that's kind of interesting. That's just me. Okay. So let's do Charles Sanders first. I mean, they're close friends actually, but Peirce is the one that's officially the one who invents pragmatism. Remember, James kind of stole it from him. But what Peirce primarily meant by pragmatism was a theory of meaning. And what he's trying to do is a follower of Kant, and just like Hegel, and I don't know how much Hegel influenced him, it's clearly the case that William James was influenced by Hegel a lot more than Charles Sanders Peirce. But his answer to Kant's situation, his metaphysics, was that language is where we have to go in order to understand what structures our perception of the world. So very similar to the way things worked out, following Hegel, Peirce is doing the same thing. So it looks very similar. And remember, my argument would be that while in Europe, the schools that followed Hegel existentialism on the one hand focuses on the unique self being so isolated and having to determine meaning for itself, and depressed, people depressed, etc. And the other school would be Marxism, that basically ignores the self and thinks everybody's a class, a social class. You know, it's class consciousness, class fights against other classes, etc. You know, the revolution is a class war, right? Neither of those practically work out at all. I mean, you know, existentialism, I could see how it fits a really depressed culture, because the World War I and World War II just made life absolutely horrific. If you were living there, so many people died, so many people lost their wealth, so much was destroyed. That's depressing just by itself. So it's almost like, well, it's not that they needed existentialism, it just fit, right? Whereas, thank you, Lenin, who realized that Russia wasn't designed already to be a communism, because Marx said you really needed these European nations where you had capitalism first, and that capitalism would get to a point where the rich had so much and everybody else had so little that everybody, the proletariat, would literally rebel against the rich and take things into their own hands violently, right? Russia never matured to the point where it had a capitalism. So strictly speaking, Russia wasn't a candidate for communism, because you had to go through these stages, these physical stages to get there, right? Since Russia was still a feudal or nobility owning all the serfs, you know, all the ground and everything, Lenin had to change Marx, and so his interpretation of Marx is called Leninism, Marxist-Leninism, because he had to say we can skip historical stages and go right to communism. Of course, it didn't work, right? So short, you know, story. Both philosophies, both misunderstandings of Hegel, I would say, collapsed socially in a tragic situation. I mean, you know, none of it was good for anybody, right? But where does it keep the whole philosophical context of yes, you're an individual, and yes, you know, we're all individuals. No, I'm not. Wait a minute. How can we all be individuals, but actually we're all individuals? That's you know, a paradox. You know, well, we accept the paradoxical nature of these dialectical aspects of our metaphysics, right? That's evolution.